Cedar Hollow, Kansas, 1878. Emmett Calder had painted Josephine Weatherby's porch every fall for 6 years running, and in all that time, neither of them had ever once called it anything but a favor. He finished the last rail on a cool afternoon in late September, stepped back to check the line of it against the failing light, and found her already standing in the doorway with 2 glasses of buttermilk, watching him the way she always did, with an expression he had never quite worked up the nerve to name. "You missed a spot," she said, though he had not. He looked at the porch, and then at her, and something in his face must have shown more than he meant it to, because she laughed, quick and a little too bright, and said, "Well, I suppose that is what happens when a boy goes chasing after a woman my age. He does not paint straight lines anymore." The words landed lighter than she meant them to, and heavier than either of them expected, and for a moment neither one of them said anything at all. To understand why a joke like that could stop a porch dead quiet on an ordinary September afternoon, it helps to go back 6 years, to the first fall Emmett Calder ever picked up a brush for money he badly needed, on a porch that belonged to a woman he had not yet learned to be careful around. Emmett Calder was 19 years old the first time he painted that porch, and 25 the fall the joke finally landed the way it did. He was tall, broad through the shoulders from years of honest carpentry work, with black hair that brushed his collar and a short dark beard kept trimmed close enough to pass for tidy. He wore a cream shirt under a worn brown coat most days, trousers gone soft with wear, and a hat that had belonged to his father before it belonged to him, which was, as far as Emmett knew, the only thing that had. His parents had died of fever within a week of each other when he was 11, and he had been raised after that by an aunt who did her honest best and passed on herself before Emmett turned 17, leaving him to make his own way in Cedar Hollow with nothing much behind him and no particular expectation of anything ahead. He apprenticed under Cyrus Dunmore, the town's master carpenter, a dry, exacting man who had taken him on more out of habit than sentiment and had, somewhere along the way, become the closest thing to family Emmett had left. Cyrus had a saying he repeated often enough that Emmett had stopped hearing it as advice and started hearing it as simple fact, that the difference between a job and a devotion was whether a man would still show up to do it if nobody ever paid him again. Emmett had painted Josephine Weatherby's porch the first fall for $2, badly needed at the time, and every fall after that for nothing at all, and had never once thought to examine what that particular arithmetic might mean about him. He had a dog, a rough brown hound named Whistler, who followed him everywhere, including, every September, up the lane to the Weatherby place, where the animal had developed the settled habit of lying across the porch steps for the duration of the work as though he had personally been invited to stay. Josephine Weatherby was 41 years old, and she had run her father's homestead alone for 12 years since his passing. 300 acres of good Kansas land with a kitchen garden that fed half the county's opinions about her independence, and an orchard she had planted herself, tree by tree, in the years when she had nothing better to do with the particular kind of restlessness that comes from a life that did not go the way it was supposed to. She had light red hair, coppery and unmistakable, with a single faint thread of silver at her temple that she had stopped bothering to disguise years ago, and she wore a light blue dress most days that suited her exactly, the way certain colors simply do on certain people. She was strikingly, undeniably handsome, the kind of woman a room noticed without her doing anything to invite it, and she moved through her own land with the graceful, unhurried competence of somebody who had built a life entirely on her own terms and had made, mostly, a genuine peace with it. At 24, she had been engaged to a man named Reuben, who left for opportunity out west and simply never wrote again to say why, leaving Josephine to hear the news secondhand at the dry goods store in front of most of Cedar Hollow, which was a particular kind of humiliation a person did not easily set down. She had spent the 17 years since building a life that required nothing from anyone, and had privately decided, somewhere in that decision, that she would rather be teased for her independence than ever again be pitied for having hoped. Her closest friend, Agnes Fairbanks, who ran the boarding house on the north end of town, was the one person who knew how carefully Josephine had constructed all of it, and the one person, increasingly, who thought the construction had gone on rather longer than it needed to. Larger opinions in Cedar Hollow currently concerned Harold Norwood, the widowed keeper of the general store, respectable and comfortable and entirely sensible, who had begun calling on Josephine with the careful regularity of a man who considered the matter mostly settled already. The fall. The joke finally landed. Emmett arrived at the Weatherby place already carrying something he had not told anyone yet, not even Cyrus. A letter had come the week before from a builder in a bigger town 2 counties east, offering steady work at wages Cedar Hollow could never match, foreman's pay for a man not yet 26, the kind of opportunity Emmett understood he had no honest reason to refuse. He had told himself, riding out with his brushes and his paint, that this fall's porch would simply be the last one, a fact he intended to mention plainly and did not manage to mention at all. He worked slower than usual and finished later than usual, and when he stepped back to check the line of the final rail, Josephine was already in the doorway with the buttermilk, watching him with an expression that had, over 6 years, become entirely familiar, and that he had never once let himself properly read. "You missed a spot," she said. He had not, and they both knew it. And for a moment, he simply looked at her instead of correcting her, longer than a hired man looks at the woman whose porch he is painting, long enough that something crossed her face too, some flicker of understanding she was clearly not prepared for. She recovered first, the way she always recovered first, with a laugh and a joke. "Well, I suppose that is what happens when a boy goes chasing after a woman my age. He does not paint straight lines anymore." Emmett did not laugh. He looked at the porch and at her, and said nothing at all, and the silence that followed was the loudest thing that had passed between them in 6 years. Then he set down his brush, said he ought to get the paint cleaned before dark, and rode home with Whistler at his heels, and a letter in his coat pocket he no longer had any idea what to do with. Emmett spent that evening arguing with himself in the particular circular way of a man who already knows the honest answer and is simply looking for a way around it. He told himself the porch was a kindness, nothing more, the kind of thing a decent man did for a woman who had once been kind to a boy with nothing to his name. He told himself the letter was simply good sense, the kind of chance a man in his position could not afford to romanticize away. What he could not quite tell himself, not honestly, was that Josephine Weatherby saw him as anything other than the boy who painted her porch every September, competent and useful and entirely, permanently, a boy. That was his fear, plainly, when he let himself look at it. That he had nothing to offer a woman who had built an entire independent life, requiring nothing from anyone, and that saying anything at all would only embarrass them both and cost him the one excuse he had ever had to see her. Josephine had her own argument to have with herself, and she had it that same evening, alone on the porch he had just finished, running her thumb along the rail the way she might once have run it along the edge of a decision she had made too quickly at 24. She had built 17 years of careful independence, specifically so she would never again be the woman the whole county pitied for having hoped, and she recognized, with real alarm, that she had come dangerously close to hoping again that very afternoon, on her own porch, over a spot of paint that had never needed correcting. Her fear was not really about Emmett's age at all, whatever the arithmetic said. It was that wanting something openly, and being wrong about it again, was a particular kind of foolish she had promised herself she would never risk being called twice. That same week, Harold Norwood called on her formally, in his good coat, and spoke plainly and sensibly about the advantages of a settled arrangement between 2 settled people. And Josephine listened and thanked him and told him she would consider it, which was true, and which felt, afterward, like agreeing to something considerably smaller than what she actually wanted. Emmett told Cyrus about the letter the following Tuesday, working a plank smooth between them in the shop, and Cyrus listened the whole way through before setting down his own tool. "Good money," Cyrus said, "foreman's pay. It is a fine offer." Emmett agreed that it was. Cyrus studied him a moment longer than the conversation strictly required. "You do not look like a man who has decided anything," he said. Emmett did not answer that directly, which Cyrus correctly understood as an answer of its own. "You know what I always say," Cyrus said, "about a job and a devotion." Emmett said he had heard it a few hundred times. "Then you already know which one that porch has been for 6 years," Cyrus said, and went back to his plank without further comment, leaving Emmett to sit with that longer than he wanted to. Josephine, for her part, told Agnes everything over coffee 2 days later: the joke, the silence, the particular way Emmett had looked at her before he rode off. Agnes, who had watched this unfold at a careful distance for at least 3 of the 6 years in question, did not bother pretending surprise. "You have been feeding that boy buttermilk every September since he was 19, Agnes said, and calling it nothing. "I know how old he is," Josephine said. "I did not ask how old he was," Agnes said. "I asked what you were going to do about it." In the weeks that followed, Emmett found reasons to come by that had nothing to do with paint. He fixed the hinge on her garden gate without being asked, and repaired a section of split-rail fence along the orchard the same weekend. And neither time did he mention it, and neither time did Josephine bring it up, though she noticed both, the way she noticed most things about her own land, immediately and without comment. She caught him at the gate once, straightening a hinge before dawn on a Saturday, and stood in the doorway in her shawl watching him work for a full minute before he noticed her there. "You're going to run out of things on this property that need fixing," she said. "Then I suppose I will have to find new ones," he said, not looking up, and something in the plainness of his answer sat with her the better part of that morning. One evening in late September, after the fence was finished and the light had gone properly gray, Josephine asked if he would stay for supper, the way she might ask any neighbor who had done a day's honest work on her land, and Emmett, who had never once in 6 years been asked to stay past the porch, said yes before he had properly thought about what saying yes might mean. They ate at her kitchen table, plain food and good conversation, Whistler stationed hopefully beneath it for the length of the meal, and for the first time in 6 years the two of them talked about something other than the weather or the work directly in front of them. Her father's homestead and what he had wanted for it, Emmett's parents and the little he actually remembered of them, the particular kind of quiet that settles into a house built for more people than currently live in it. Neither of them mentioned the porch, or the letter, or the joke that was still sitting between them unresolved, though both were aware, in the comfortable silence that followed the meal, that the evening had shifted, something neither could name plainly yet. Whistler, who had by now essentially adopted the Weatherby porch steps as a second home, took to lying beneath the kitchen window on the mornings Emmett worked nearby, refusing all attempts to call him back to the wagon until the work was finished, a fact Emmett found increasingly difficult to argue with, since the dog's judgment on the matter seemed, if anything, considerably clearer than his own. In town, Martha at the dry goods store had begun remarking, to anyone who would listen, that Emmett Calder's wagon spent more time at the Weatherby turnoff than any fence or gate reasonably required, and the remark, as such remarks do in small towns, traveled considerably faster than either Emmett or Josephine did. Agnes overheard some of this herself one Saturday at the counter, two women discussing the matter with more enthusiasm than tact, and set down her own purchases long enough to observe, pleasantly, that she had known both Emmett Calder and Josephine Weatherby a great deal longer than either of them currently gossiping had, and that neither one needed the county's opinion delivered second-hand over the flour barrel. The two women found other things to discuss rather quickly after that. If this story has been settling in easy tonight, a like on this video and a tap on subscribe cost you nothing and would mean a great deal to this channel. Now, back to Cedar Hollow, because Emmett Calder has a letter he still has not answered, a decision he has been avoiding for weeks, and a fall that is running out considerably faster than he is. By the middle of October, Harold Norwood had stopped being patient about the matter, in the mild, unhurried way of a man who had never once in his life needed to be urgent about anything. He escorted Josephine to the harvest social at the church hall, properly, and the town watched the two of them together with the particular satisfaction of people whose expectations were finally being confirmed. Emmett was there too, having come with Cyrus more out of habit than enthusiasm, and he watched Harold lead Josephine through 2 dances, with the particular stillness of a man working hard to look unaffected by something that was affecting him considerably. Josephine caught his eye once across the hall, briefly, and something passed between them that neither Harold nor the rest of the room seemed to notice, though Cyrus, standing beside Emmett with his arms crossed, noticed everything and said nothing, which was its own kind of comment. Cyrus found Emmett at the shop the following morning and set down his coffee with the deliberate care of a man about to say something he had turned over more than once. "She is old enough to remember when this town did not have a church," he said. "People are going to talk, Emmett, whatever you decide." Emmett did not deny it. "I know what people are going to say," he said. "I've had considerable practice not caring what people say about things that are not their business." Cyrus looked at him a long moment, then nodded, satisfied in the particular way of a man who had asked mostly to see how the answer landed. Emmett did not answer right away when Cyrus asked, a little later, what he actually meant to do about it. "I keep thinking about the corner of her orchard that has gone unplanted for years," he finally said, quieter than usual. "Somebody ought to do something about that before it is too late to matter." Cyrus looked at him for a long moment, understanding perfectly well that they were no longer discussing trees, and said only that a man generally knew his own mind a good deal better than he gave himself credit for, and went back to his coffee without further comment. Word reached Josephine, through Agnes, that the builder 2 counties east was still waiting on Emmett's answer, and that the deadline for it was the first hard frost, which by any reasonable Kansas reckoning was no more than 3 weeks off. Something in Josephine understood, hearing this, that whatever she had spent 17 years protecting herself from was about to happen whether she gave it permission or not, and that the porch, the joke, the paint, none of it would simply wait for her to decide she was ready. She found herself that same week telling Harold Norwood she needed a little longer to consider his offer, which was not entirely true, since some part of her had already stopped considering it at all. She turned the conversation over in her mind the whole ride home and understood, with the particular clarity that arrives when a person finally stops arguing with themselves, that she did not need longer to consider Harold Norwood at all. She needed longer to work up the courage to consider something else entirely, something considerably less sensible and considerably more frightening, and she was not yet ready to say so out loud to anyone, including herself. Emmett wrote his answer to the builder on a Sunday evening and did not send it right away, sitting with it a full day before he understood he had already decided and was only delaying the formality of admitting it. He declined the position, plainly, without dressing up the reasons, and rode into town the next morning to post the letter before he could talk himself out of it a second time. That same week, working early mornings before the shop opened, he cleared a corner of Josephine's orchard she had never quite gotten around to filling and planted a young apple tree there himself, telling no one, not even Cyrus, though Cyrus noticed the dirt under his fingernails and the particular quiet way Emmett had been moving through his days and kept his guesses to himself. Emmett understood, kneeling in the cold ground with the tree not yet 3 feet tall, that it would be years before it bore anything worth eating, and that he was planting it anyway, on land that was not his, for a woman who had not said yes to anything yet, because some decisions a man makes before he has any right to expect the outcome. He thought, working the last of the dirt in around the roots, of Cyrus's old line about the difference between a job and a devotion, and understood, finally, plainly, which one he had been doing all along. He brought her out to the orchard on a Saturday morning in early November before the first real frost, and led her to the corner she had never filled, where the young tree stood thin and bare against the gray sky. "What is this?" she said. "A tree," he said. "I can see that, Emmett. Why is it in my orchard?" He turned to look at her directly, the way he had not quite managed on the porch the month before. "Because it will not bear anything for years," he said. "Maybe 5, maybe more. I planted it anyway." She looked at the tree and then at him, and something in her face went very still. "I am 25 years old," he said, "and you are 41, and a half this town would tell you I am too young to know my own mind, and I have known my own mind about you since I was 19 years old and too proud to say so." "I turned down the letter," he said. "The job east. I sent my answer Monday." Josephine's breath caught. "You did that before you knew what I would say," she said. "I did," he said. "It did not seem right to ask you to choose me and then hand you a man who had not already chosen you first." He held her gaze without wavering. "You called me a boy chasing a woman your age," he said. "I have thought on that a great deal since. I would rather be exactly that, plainly, out loud, than spend one more September painting a porch and riding home alone. Is that a yes, or do you need me to check the line of it again?" Josephine looked at the tree and at this man who had loved her patiently for 6 years before either of them had the courage to call it what it was, and felt whatever careful arithmetic she had built her whole independence around simply, finally, stop mattering. "It did not need doing," she said, her voice unsteady, and Emmett went very still, because that was the old line, the porch line, and he did not understand yet what she meant by it. Then, more clearly, "It will next year," she said, and she was smiling, the real one, and Emmett understood, and crossed the space between them, and kissed her there in the cold orchard beside a tree that would not bear fruit for years and had been planted anyway. They were married in December in the Cedar Hollow Church with the whole town in attendance, since the whole town had, by then, formed strong opinions about an outcome most of them privately admitted they had seen coming since sometime around the 4th or 5th September. Josephine wore light blue, the silver thread at her temple catching the winter light through the windows, because she had never seen any reason a wedding should change what already suited her. Harold Norwood attended, gracious about the whole matter in a way that considerably improved his standing in Cedar Hollow, and told Emmett afterward, without bitterness, that he supposed the town's better carpenter had built a stronger case than the town's better shopkeeper ever managed to. Agnes cried through most of the ceremony and told anyone who asked that she had been waiting 6 years for somebody to finally say the true thing out loud. Cyrus sat near the front, and when congratulated afterward, said only that he had told Emmett the same thing about devotion for 6 years running, and was glad the boy had finally understood which one he had actually been building. Emmett moved his tools and Whistler and what little else he owned out to the Weatherby place that same month, and the work of the homestead settled quickly into a rhythm built on competence rather than convention, Josephine handling the accounts in the orchard as she always had, Emmett taking on the carpentry the place had long needed and slowly building a modest independent trade of his own from a workshop he raised behind the barn. The workshop filled steadily with commissions from families who had once considered the longer drive to a bigger town for good carpentry, and now saw no particular reason to, since Emmett Calder's work was, by any honest measure, better than what they would have found there anyway. Whistler took up permanent residence on the porch steps, having apparently concluded some years earlier that this was always where the arrangement was headed, and showed no particular surprise at any of it. Josephine's orchard, tended now by 2 sets of hands instead of one, produced its best harvest in a decade that first autumn, and she remarked once, watching Emmett carry in the last of the apple crates, that she could not remember the property ever feeling quite this occupied before, in the best possible sense of the word. In their first spring together, Josephine found herself, one evening on the porch, voicing a worry she had been turning over privately for weeks. "You are 26 now," she said. "You will be 40 while I am past 55, and people will look at us then the way they looked at us this fall, except it will not be a joke anymore, and I do not know if that is fair to ask of you." Emmett took her hand, the same hand that had painted that porch 6 autumns running, and held it plainly. "I did not marry the version of you that would be easiest to explain to strangers," he said. "I married the one who brought me buttermilk and called me a boy, and meant something else entirely by it." Josephine was quiet a moment, turning his answer over the way she turned over most things before she let herself believe them fully. "You make it sound simple," she said. "It is simple," he said. "It is only not easy, which is a different thing entirely. And you taught me that difference yourself, the fall you kept correcting a rail that was already perfectly straight." He did not need to say more than that, and she did not bring the worry up again, though he noticed her, some evenings, watching the orchard with the particular quiet of a woman doing arithmetic she had finally decided did not need solving. 4 autumns had settled the Calder place, as most people in Cedar Hollow now called it without particular thought, into something that felt less like 2 separate lives joined together, and more like a single life that had simply always included both of them. Whistler, gray about the muzzle now, had long since stopped following Emmett anywhere at all, preferring instead to hold his post on the porch steps, as though the entire arrangement had been his idea from the beginning, which Emmett privately suspected the old dog believed to be true. 4 autumns later, the young tree in the corner of the orchard bore its first real fruit, small and tart and entirely worth the wait, and Emmett picked the first of it on a cool September morning and carried it up to the porch, where Josephine was already waiting with 2 glasses of buttermilk out of a habit neither of them had ever formally decided to keep. He had painted the porch again that same week, out of the same old habit, though he no longer did it for $2 or for nothing at all, only because it was plainly his porch too now. "You missed a spot," she said, the way she always said it, and he had not, and they both knew it, and he looked at the rail and then at her, the way he had learned, over 10 autumns now, to look at her without any hurry to look away. "Well," he said, setting the first apple down beside her glass, "I suppose that is what happens when a boy goes chasing after a woman his own age, eventually." Josephine laughed, the real one, and picked up the apple, and looked at the tree it had come from, thin no longer, and at the man beside her who had planted it before he had any right to expect the outcome, and understood, the way she understood most things about her own land, immediately and without needing it explained, that she had never once been foolish for wanting this. Whistler, from his post on the steps, thumped his tail once against the wood, in what Emmett had long since learned to interpret as complete and total agreement. Josephine Weatherby spent 17 years believing that a joke was safer than the truth. It was not really about Emmett's age, whatever the county liked to say about it over coffee at the dry goods store. It was that somewhere back at 24, in front of half the town, she had learned that wanting something out loud was the kind of thing that could be taken from a person and laughed at afterward, and she had spent nearly 2 decades making certain nobody ever got the chance to laugh at her again. Emmett had his own version of the same shield, quieter, but just as sturdy. He believed for 6 long autumns that being useful was the safest thing a boy with nothing behind him could offer a woman who needed nothing from anyone, and that saying anything plainer than a coat of whitewash would only prove he had misunderstood his own place. Here is what this particular story gets right, if you want the honest reading of it. Sometimes a joke is not distance at all. Sometimes it is the only language 2 careful people have for saying something true without risking the whole of themselves saying it. A boy chasing a woman my age was never really a joke between them. It was the closest either one could get to the truth for 6 entire years, dressed up gently enough that it could be laughed off if it needed to be. What finally changed everything was a man deciding to plant something that would not pay him back for years, on land that was not yet his, for a woman who had not yet said yes. That is not really a story about an age gap, not underneath. It is a story about the particular courage it takes to do something patient and unglamorous and completely unguaranteed, simply because a person has decided, quietly, that the one on the other end of it is worth the years it takes to find out. The porch never needed painting nearly as badly as either of them needed a reason to keep showing up. Sometimes that is exactly how a true thing gets said in this life, one unremarkable September at a time, until somebody finally becomes brave enough to stop calling it a favor. Thank you for spending this evening with Emmett and Josephine. Truly, it means more than you likely know. Tell me in the comments, did you catch on somewhere around that 3rd September? Or did it take the whole orchard scene to convince you these 2 were always going to end up exactly here? If this story kept you good company tonight, a like and a subscribe help this channel find its way to more people who might need a quiet hour like this one. And if somebody in your life could use it too, I hope you will pass it along. Wherever you are listening from tonight, I hope something good is waiting for you that is worth the patience it takes to get there. Until next time, keep writing.